Hi, welcome to ICP Content Conversations. My name is Wadey and I head up the Technology and Innovation Services team. I've been working in the content operations space for about the last 15 years. Should have a good conversation with Dan.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Al. Hi, I'm Dan Rowe. I'm the Chief Innovation Automation Officer at ICP. I've been working in and around marketing operations and marketing technology for a similar period of time as Al, and looking forward to the conversation. So I guess start off with the fact that today's content operating models weren't really designed to scale or weren't really set up for the kind of volume and variance of content that we're seeing in the industry today, Al.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that the interesting thing is even back 10, 15 years ago, we were having the same conversation. It's just a slightly different story to it. So we're moving more into the area where everybody is wanting to use generative AI capabilities and so on and so forth, so to kind of build out the content that they have, the repository that they have, to do more with personalization and so on and so forth. So therefore, because there's that kind of different view on it, it really comes towards how are you going to build out your repository so that you can utilize all of those different capabilities more and more and more. It's really interesting because one of the other areas that I see a lot happening in is where you're looking at what are the problems around the metadata associated with that, which is very different to the problems pre-generative AI. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the sheer proliferation of different variants of content across different channels and then needing to be repurposed. And then when we're talking about different industries, regulated, non-regulated, and the fact that metadata is really so key to sort of getting hold of content, and then key for distribution of content, reusing that content, reimagining that content. So absolutely, and I think we're seeing a lot of clients struggling to really keep up with that. So content's coming in, it's metadata less, or it has got barely enough data with it. So then it goes undiscovered, unused, different parts of the organisation. So just the sheer organisational effort to keep up with that alone is getting massively amplified and more pressured as we go through this kind of next 5 years, and for the last 2 to 3 years, as you say, going back to 10 years ago, generally volume increases meant a percentage more content, a percentage more of this to do, whereas now it's going up double digit, triple digit, quarter on quarter, year on year for brands and for our clients as well.
So I think one of the really interesting things is when you look at the different types of content. So you have textual-based content, and then you have images, videos, other different bits and pieces. And when you look at how organisations are wanting to create more content using generative AI, the models are much further forward with textual content than they are with images or videos. So images and videos, you can create content, but it's not as advanced and it's not necessarily as business focused as that textual content can be. So I think we've all played around with Claude, with OpenAI, whatever, to create new content. A lot of that we've managed to create good business content, but when you're doing images, it's generally to wind up work colleagues or something like that. We're not necessarily using that in the business world to create net new content.
Now, I know a lot of clients are experimenting with their generative AI projects and particularly image-based content, but how do you think that's impacting them around their DAM programs and really organising that and bringing that together inside their DAM platforms? And how do you think they're doing with that?
So I think it's a really interesting one because, again, it goes back to exactly the same problems we had many years ago, but for different reasons. So it all goes back to the idea of content reuse. So we've always talked about content reuse from the perspective of wanting to be able to say, I've got this image, this video that I was using for a certain campaign, let's use it for another campaign. We maybe only need to tweak it or change it slightly. But where we're moving into now is, the more content that you've got to feed into the models to be able to create or repurpose that content, the better. So when we talk about DAM solutions, it goes back even more relevantly to the idea of being able to search for that content and find the right content where previously you were using it for inspiration to create net new.
Yeah.
Now you can potentially feed it into LLMs to be able to get them to do that for you.
It becomes an essential part, really, of the dam, and effectively this is the dam's second generation or rebirth, should we say, and how critical it is in terms of driving the leverage of content, driving generative AI and so forth. And just, I guess, circling back to that discoverability point and data and metadata and classification of content, how important is that, or isn't that, do you think, as we go forward over the next sort of 18 to 24 months?
I mean, again, I think it's hugely critical, because it's totally pointless putting content into your dam if people can't find it, and people won't be able to find it unless it's tagged correctly, so that actually the models that you've got in play can find that content. You know, it's not like it can just magically find a piece of content regardless of what you've done with it. You still need to put in the relevant metadata for the models to use that to find that. So from that perspective, I think it's even more critical that you can find content that you want to reuse and repurpose and push into those models to be able to create that content moving forward in a slightly different way. I mean, another thing that's quite interesting from that perspective is, you know, how do we see this expanding in the future? And I think, you know, one of the bits that I've spoken to a number of the DAM vendors about, and some of them are kind of quite tied to it, some of them are very open to change, but is, where is that content stored now? Does it necessarily have to be in a DAM database, or could it be stored somewhere else and just referenced in that DAM database, so you can get the context of where it's at without actually having to store that context in the DAM? The LLMs, the agents can go and find it and say, this is the context of where that content is being used, and you don't necessarily need to put any metadata into it. I think that's kind of where everything's going, but to be able to do that, the support and the maintenance around that, and the human in the loop, that kind of part of it is massively critical, because if you get that wrong, it goes back to the idea of, you know, okay, well, I've got this piece of content, I've no idea where it's being used, how it's being used. It hasn't been, you know, the agent hasn't been set up in the right way to be able to surface the metadata you want to know about finding or reusing that correct content.
Yeah, really interesting, really fascinating. I was just thinking then, as you were talking, also about how far the AI agents within the DAM platforms have come, really. If we go back to the early days of sort of, you know, the very basic using an open or a standard model to do some tagging and bring you back some information about the asset. But if we think about that textual based point you raised earlier, and the models being so much more advanced in terms of their ability to analyze and create text, but what do you see, or what are you seeing in terms of the advancement of the models that are actually analysing image and video-based content, and really helping people to understand how to better classify, how to classify more quickly, and make that content more discoverable? I
mean, I think the critical thing now is that really what you need to be thinking of is, how do you put in as much information as possible with as minimum human interaction as possible and as much automation in play, so that, you know, it doesn't really matter how the future may evolve or how the different systems may use that data. You want to put in as much content as possible so that there's as much information in there for the agents to kind of filter out what they do and don't need, because you don't really know how that's likely to be searched or used or reused in the future. So it's about making it as open as you possibly can, and putting as much content in there as you can, so that the agents can use it however they're deemed to see fit moving forward. So I think, you know, one of the big things that changes, and one of the big problems that it creates for us as an organisation is, you know, gone are the days of, I don't want 250 different bits of metadata on an asset, because actually it's not the user that is populating that, it's the user that is almost validating it. So you want to start to use the systems to populate all of that content, and then have people, human in the loop, kind of validating that what it's populated is correct, so that then actually in the future, whenever anything is using it, you know exactly that all of that information is in there and you can use it however you may see fit from a agentic framework moving forward.
So something that's on my mind is really around our clients and their ambitions to create digital content backbones for their organisations, where they've got all of their content in one place organised, and then they're distributing that to all the channels, all the stakeholders they need. We're obviously helping a lot of our clients do that at scale today, globally. But how do you see that transforming and changing with the use of technology and innovation in the next 18 to 24 months now?
So a critical bit there is, again, about content reuse. And to be able to reuse content, you need to have it tagged correctly. And to tag it correctly, that's where generative AI comes into play in terms of making sure that it's using prompts to automate that tagging as much as possible, so that people can then find that content that they want to reuse, repurpose, or maybe use automation to reuse and repurpose it, so that when you look at the distribution down the channels and the personalization, you've got all of the content you need to be able to create the personalization needs for the downstream.
I guess, given back to our points earlier about the sheer volume and pace of the growth of that scale, it necessitates forms of automation and leverage of AI technologies to achieve that tagging and that correct classification at speed and scale. It's really simply not possible just to keep scaling people to build that out. You
can't continually build people on top of it, because then from that perspective it just becomes more and more complex.
One of the things that I know challenges DAM providers and DAM consumers and users is really search and how to find things. And we've seen really with kind of AI and natural language search, how those solutions have really opened up that the ability to find things in a way that I think, or the way that you think, or others think. So I don't need to follow necessarily a prescriptive path. Is it realistic to see that as kind of the mainstream interface to searching and looking for content and distributing content in the future? And I guess through that, do we then actually learn, based on people's patterns of how they look for things, what data we actually do need to capture on content versus what we don't?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the critical part there is that those natural language searches still have to be searching content. So it goes back to making sure that your content is enriched enough with the relevant metadata that those natural language searches can use. But as long as you've got that metadata enrichment in place, as those natural language searches evolve, as it gets more personalized to the search requirements of the user, the metadata capability is there. So it really goes back to the stopping point is, how much metadata have you got in your content that all of those semantic search capabilities around it can utilize? And
of course the right type of metadata.
Yep.
As to how much, there's obviously you need certain basics, but there's that right type of data. And that's kind of the thing I was really thinking about, is a world in which we've got a virtuous cycle between both what we're seeing as patterns for search and how content is discovered, to then feed into, okay, this is the data we do need to capture in future, versus some of the pre-described models that we often set about with, whether it's on a DAM implementation, a new program, or a taxonomy program. It's often all about creating significant structure within which to store things. And the working assumption for that is that that's going to benefit all of the end users and stakeholders and consumers of that content. But invariably, there's not normally a connection between the two, or an exact connection. And I think AI, and I think some of the innovations we're seeing, is going to give us the opportunity to establish that and play that back.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at all the different DAM vendors and how they're looking at trying to orchestrate and build agents in the platform, it's to serve that exact purpose.
Yeah.
One of the main reasons why we see that customers don't look at migrating onto a new platform that's giving them more capabilities, more functions, is around migration. So it's very difficult to migrate off of a existing platform that's kind of segmented into so many different areas. So when you look at content solution, a DAM solution, there are so many different connections into downstream platforms. Moving that away from one platform onto a completely different platform is seen as a really big undertaking from a customer standpoint.
That really drags on innovation, on change, and the kind of value that marketing leaders and chief marketing officers really need to be getting, particularly around some of the technology innovation we're seeing in content operations and DAM and automation.
100%.